Hey, everybody. We're live. We never do this live. We never do YCDP live. I do lots of my other podcast shows live, and I'm kind of used to it. This morning when I booted up the studio in the bonus room above the garage on the north side of Fort Mill, nothing worked. I had to fix it all before we got started, but we got started. On the other side of the screen is Jenny Desch. We will do a show now and talk to her. So yeah, she'll be here in just a minute. Let me see if this button works. Oh, there we go. Didn't have the fader turned up. From the studio in the bonus room above the garage on the north side of Fort Mill, South Carolina, in the shadow of Charlotte, the foot of Mount Belzoni, the buckle of the Bible Belt. Yes, live always works. This is the York County Democratic Party's YouTube show and podcast. We call it YCDP TV. And get everything lined up here. Here is today's show. We're going to talk to Jenny Desch. Jenny is running for State House of Representatives, not Congress, State House of Representatives. That's the folks that meet in Columbia, from the 26th district that is Greater Fort Mill. Fort Mill is what's in the picture behind me, which I tried to get a nice Google Maps aerial picture in it. It's all roofs. So you don't really see, it doesn't like say Fort Mill.
Greenway. I would have probably shown the Greenway a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, downtown is what seems to me to be like, the iconic Fort Mill, but the whole block of downtown. Jenny Desch, welcome to YCDP TV.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. All right. So you're running for State House. Your current job, and we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. The way I kind of look at this is I've got a tremendous amount of privilege that I get to talk to you folks, you candidates. It's on Zoom, but it's kind of as if we were sitting in your living room, sitting on a couch, just chewing the fat. Talk about the politics. Talk about the weather if we want. It's raining. Talk about what you've done, your life, all that stuff. The whole idea is let people get to know you.
Sounds great.
And like I said, I feel a tremendous amount of privilege because outside of doing this podcast, I'd never get to do that. So this is awesome. Your job currently, you are a assistant solicitor.
I am. Not many people know what that means.
So we're going to change the name immediately to
Prosecutor.
And everybody knows what that is because half the shows on TV are about your job.
Right. I mean, of the Law and Order, I'm the order.
Yep. And you do that down in Columbia, right?
I do. But I worked in York County for over 19 years.
All right. How long you been doing it in Columbia?
Going on 2.
Okay. Because what I'm thinking of is the commute.
Oh, yeah. I do commute. But it's nice being down there because you really get closer to what's going on in the city. And, of course, I can pop down to the State House. It's a block from, a couple blocks from my work. So
why did you decide that you wanted to run for office now? You've been involved in government for a long, long time.
I have been. I have been a government employee, a prosecutor for almost the entirety of my adult career. I've worked in prosecution for over 25 years. When you're a lawyer, most people say, do you want to grow up to be a judge? And every time I'd answer, I'd say, no, I actually want to make the laws. I get to enact them and do that now, but being drawn to the legislation or legislator position has always been a pull for me because I see how laws actually affect us every day in the criminal justice system. So that was what was really important. And now it just seemed incredibly imperative right now to join the fight.
Yeah, politics today, government today is a whole different thing than it's been for a long time. But so this isn't just something you just came by. It's been on your mind for a while.
It has been.
I think I remember when you spoke at the county convention, you mentioned something interesting, that you can't hold two government jobs at once.
Right.
Have I got
Right.
that correct? So if you were to be elected, you would have to leave your prosecutor job.
Right. Right. And that's part of the timing. For years it's been an interest, but I love being a prosecutor. I love helping people. I love being a public servant. And so it was really tough to think like having to give that up. And the theory is that you can't hold two elected positions. And even though I'm not personally elected, I work for an elected. So I could not work for an elected and be an elected. And so that was a large part in the timing of it all.
The guy or woman, I don't know, that you work for, the elected solicitor, prosecutor,
Right.
is that a nonpartisan job, or is that a partisan elected job?
It is a partisan elected job. I personally, I think solicitors and sheriffs could benefit from being nonpartisan, but it is partisan, and each jurisdiction chooses that. But it is partisan, and but both I've worked for, originally Solicitor Tommy Pope and then Solicitor Kevin Brackett, both from the Republican Party. I worked for them for years. And they were always very fair and never let politics get involved in what we did. And we always had, our duty was always to do the right thing for the right reason. And that permeated throughout our job, and everyone that was hired was always, that was a push for us, is that we did the right thing for the right reason. It's a personal push for me. Same thing working for Solicitor Gibson. It is, it's a different party, but it's the same mantra. You do right by the public.
Yeah, that's refreshing to hear these days.
Yeah,
I mean, it must be driving you crazy to watch what's going on with the federal judiciary, the federal Justice Department, and what Trump is doing with it. It's got to be driving you crazy. Does it drive your boss crazy?
We don't. I think the hardest part is that our bosses have to navigate the South Carolina system and really focus on what we're doing. And they're relatively isolated in what they have to do. I mean, an elected official has the power to do what they want with their office. And so things do come down, but in the weirdest ways. But everyone I've worked for has had the ability to make sure that, the office is run and the choices are made that is best for that jurisdiction. And so I find it interesting when comments are made during, from other people, like comments made about it, but that has not been my personal experience. Every elected person I've worked with has always put the public first. But I will say it's incredibly disappointing to see how the DOJ is being used right now, because I always thought within the system, it didn't matter what the politics were, because the people on the ground always had ethics in the forefront, and that we worked for the people. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm seeing that not be that way. And then, of course, that reputation washes across everybody, and that's problematic. When people can't trust the system because of what is happening outside of our area, I think that's a big push for me to be very vocal about the ethical rules that we are bound by, making sure that we're still doing our job for the right reason, and that we're representing the people, and doing it in a fair and just way, and really following the Constitution. I mean, that seems just really easy to me, but it's disappointing to see that seems to be not followed by everybody.
Do you guys get some blowback from the public based on what's happening in Washington?
I mean, I think
people don't make the distinction very well, do they?
No, I mean, I think yes, we get blowback, but we can be relatively isolated, but there is a distrust. If what you're hearing online every day, and it's in your face, and you're hearing lies and misrepresentations, then that does have blowback. And so across the board, it could be a distrust of someone charged with a crime, they still have to trust the solicitor. They have to trust the prosecution. And because victims have to come in, if they don't feel like that they're being heard, or if they can't trust the motivation, then they're not going to report things. Law enforcement gets put in danger if there's a distrust based on things that are said nationally, and it goes down. They don't know what they're walking into. The community doesn't, if law enforcement comes out to help, but the community doesn't believe that. I mean, there really is this core belief that we're doing things in the right way and respecting people. And when you're seeing the opposite of that, or where you're hearing the opposite of that, it really gets problematic, because what we're ultimately built on is trust.
Is your boss up for election this year?
He is.
Yeah.
He is, but he is unopposed.
Yeah, I know. As I put together the website, I got down to the solicitor box, and there was just one guy. So we will be electing. He was unopposed in the. He's unopposed as there's no Democrat running against him. He was unopposed in the primary. So the only possible opposition would be write-in. He's still got to show up on the ballot.
Right. So my boss is in the Fifth Circuit, which would be the Columbia and Kershaw, Richland County, Kershaw area.
Not somebody we can vote for here in your county.
Yeah, Solicitor Brackett was reelected in 2024.
Okay, so we don't have that election
You don't have
here.
Yeah. So he was reelected for a 4-year term in 2024. It was actually decided in the primary in June. He had opposition for the first time, and he won the primary in June, and then there was no Democratic Party running against him in November.
Okay. Even though we've had Democrats running in lots more offices than usual, there's a big push to get Democrats running for offices across the board. That's one that didn't get filled. Which reminds me, I wanted to do this right up front. Part of our ongoing civics lesson here on YCDP TV. Some things have shifted in terms of the special primaries that are going on, and maybe we should talk about the special primaries in general. Because Lindsey Graham passed away, there's a special primary for replacing him in the Republican nomination slot on the November ballot. His name will disappear from the ballot in November. We don't know who's going to go in there because there's going to be a special primary in the, I think August 11th is the date for that. With just a couple days, just a few days of early voting for that in August. All the information is on YCDP website and a million other places. But I did a really extensive job of getting that documented on the website. So that doesn't affect most of us Democratic voters, because if you took a Democratic ballot in June, in the June primaries, you are not eligible to vote in this Republican special primary. If you took a Republican ballot, you can. If you didn't vote at all, you can. So as I mentioned in the last program, let's hear it for sloth. The folks who stayed home, now they can help decide who's going to be the Republican.
I would say pay attention, though. I really do, because what you see in primaries is a onslaught of information that gets changed when you go to the general. We had a primary on the other side in our district, and there was a lot of information given via mailers and text messages, and so it was this onslaught of information that the two of them were saying about each other. Unfortunately, some of it was, it's not necessarily a clean fight. The PACs got into it, and I always hope to stay away from all that stuff, but a lot of information given. And now in the general, I think the tone's going to change, as it absolutely does in most situations. So I would encourage everybody to pay attention to primary races and see what's said in a primary race, and then see how it changes, because we really should. If your stance is something that is genuine, then it's going to stay consistent throughout. So I do think it's very important, even if you're not able to vote, to really pay attention to what the messaging is and if it changes when it becomes a general election.
Yeah, it's as I mentioned, I think on the website, watch the food fight, because there's like 5 or 6 people that have already filed for the nomination, and they can file through I think next Monday. And one of them is our beloved Ralph Norman here in the South Carolina 5th and all across York County. He's searching for a job. You know, he got aced out of the primary for governor, and then boom, this opportunity to become a senator pops up, and he's right on the head. So we will see. Annie Andrews, our Democratic nominee, doesn't know who she is going to be running against at this point. So it's kind of hard to do everything you want to do in a campaign. You know, she can talk about what she wants to do, talk about her background and all that, but she can't address the potential opponent yet.
Yeah, I do think it's important because, you know, we get to be in the same room with each other, the statewide candidates. We've had a lot of time being in the same room with each other.
That's got to be pretty cool.
It is incredibly cool. It's also a very dynamic ticket. You know, for the first time in my career here in South Carolina, I'm seeing people on the Democratic side that are more qualified than their opponents. They are, you know, the comptroller is actually an accountant, and she's got 10 years of experience, Tiffany Boozer. So she's fantastic. You know, you've got Annie Andrews, who's a pediatrician. So I think even though it's not campaigning against the other side, this is a wonderful opportunity for people to actually get to know Annie and who she is, to really see that she is a practical person who wants to do what's best for the children. And this is an opportunity to really get in there and see that. It's not about what the other person is doing. It's about what she can bring to the table. And so these are, you know, it certainly was unexpected and not things that we want to see happen, but it's an opportunity. So I hope people take it to really get to know Dr. Andrews and really see that what she can bring to the table.
Yeah, I don't want to disparage previous candidates. I think at the senator and governor level, we've had fully qualified, really excellent candidates who didn't make it. Down ballot, sometimes there's folks that are just convinced to run as placeholders, which reminds me that Senator Graham's sister, Darlene Nordone, was thought that she was just going to be a caretaker placeholder senator to fill out the term. President Trump convinced her, I guess, to run. She is a very smart, very qualified, very experienced person in the areas that she's been in, which have not been government. So it doesn't mean, you know, other people haven't made it who have not had a strong government background. She could be, you know, turn out to be a reliable Republican type senator, which disqualifies her immediately because we're Democrats. But that's not stopping the field from jumping in and going to be opposing her, you know, Ralph Norman and the rest of the pack. So you're right. They'll run to the polls for the nomination. They'll run to the extremes, and then run back as much as they can to the center and deny everything they said in the primary.
Right.
This is kind of interesting. Often the U.S. is criticized for the length of our election season, which for some offices these days is 2 years long. As soon as a congressperson is elected, they're running for office again, at least in terms of fundraising. Other countries have very short election seasons, couple of months. Okay, that's what we got now, couple of months. And people are going, that's not long enough. We can barely tell what's going on. That ought to be plenty.
It should be. And I you know, it's a lot. There never seems to be a break. And it's problematic when you're only given 2 years. You're only guaranteed 2 years. And in certain areas, you know, as long as you run under a certain party, you're guaranteed more than that. But you're really only guaranteed 2 years if you're a House person, whether it's federal or state. And in those 2 years, you should be able to focus on your job and doing what's best for the people. Those 2 years should be about town halls to listen to the people, not stand in front of people and say, this is who I am, please give me money. Like, it really should be this public servancy that is a being able to communicate with your people who sent you there and be effective. And if you're campaigning constantly, you're not really listening because you're always thinking, what do I have to say to get more money? What do I have to say to stay in power? Who do I have to agree with? And I would want to bring it all the way back down to, I mean, 100 days, you know, 100 days to campaign. If you're doing your job correctly and you have information out there and you're doing town halls, then people know who you are. And I would desperately love to get back to that time where people have access to you, they know who you are, they have access to tell you what they need, and then they could see what you do. And if you're doing your job well, they'll show up again and again.
Yeah, and the corollary is to also get money out of the equation.
Yes, absolutely.
As much as possible.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know how we're going to do that. New Supreme Court, perhaps.
Well, you know, states have a right to do it. I don't, you know, so we've seen 2 states come up with their own way to kind of combat dark money or corporate money being in there. But it really, really is problematic. I mean, even since 2010, the amount of outside money, this corporate money, this PAC money coming into elections is just, it's exponentially out of control. And you see it across the board with this. I mean, I know people that are paying any attention are paying attention to APAC money. And it's just when what the right thing to do is lost because you're getting paid to give an answer, that is hugely problematic.
How much does that get down to the level of office that you're running to for State House?
I mean,
you have to get some money.
And see who pays, gives money to campaigns is public knowledge. I mean, we've got a person running on, you know, I won't give names, but Wes Clymer's getting a lot of money from Jim Jordan. That's public knowledge. That's so it, you know, and that it's just, you can see where money comes from. You know, State House, you can see where money comes from on my side, from my opponent's side. You know, if people want to skew things, they're going to give money. And it really, it's up to the candidate to decide what message they want to give. I mean, it's not what I would do. And I frankly don't even, I don't want to say I don't know how to. I mean, obviously I'm not naive, but it's just not how my brain works. Like if people had extra money that they wanted to give, I would build a family justice center, you know, to help victims of violence. Like, it just doesn't, you know, to me, if I need $5 to keep the literature coming or a sign or two, great. I appreciate that so much, but I need a vote. So voting is what I want. You know, I understand we've got a new way of talking, and I can't possibly knock on every single door. I would love to. I'd love to talk to people. I'd love to talk to every door. I'd like to talk to every person in my precinct. But honestly, it's the votes. And so I will be in places if people want to meet me. In fact, this afternoon, I'm going to Pet Peeve in Baxter to meet people. So a lot of money can come in, a lot of money can go out. But I think that says something about a candidate and what their overall goal is. And mine remains being a public servant.
Yeah, since we're live, I guess it would be good to mention that I don't know if anybody's actually watching. Let me take a look here. I don't really, well, there's nothing in the chat yet. Kind of hard to tell. I don't see whether there's anybody actually watching us live. It would be nice if there were sometime, but yeah, at any point we could get somebody who's tuned in via Memorex. Normally when we do a show, it's recorded and doesn't show up till the next day. So mentioning something that's happening today doesn't help. But today at 3:00, yes, you're at one of those drinking liberalies. And this one is in Baxter at Pet Peeve. What is that, a restaurant?
Pet Peeve is a side to, it's in Baxter, in front of the fish market. It's part of the fish market, but it's outside to the right. It's a cute little place that was added on, outdoor. And it's got a covering, so I'm not worried about weather at all. It's just a neat little place, and it's right in the center of Baxter Main Street. So lots of traffic. It's a great place.
Okay, something popped up in chat that says, "Looks like there are a couple of us here," and yeah, I'm seeing a few names show up in the chat. And if you guys have questions, every once in a while, I'll get back and take a look at the chat and see what you guys want to ask. I wish I could bring you in as voices, but chat is the best we can do right now. I was looking at your website, and if I were the campaign consultant, I would say, Jenny, you're doing it wrong, because right up here at the top, you have a get involved, but you don't have a send me money button. You got to go all the way down here to send some money. So
we can add that, but also, I would like people to get to know me a little bit. So there's the draw, like read through, get to know me. And if it's something that you like, donate. But yes, we can take that into consideration. I'm sure my campaign manager is listening as well. So
I'm not really suggesting that because the money part bugs the hell out of me too. Except that I understand that you have to. You absolutely have to. Campaigns run on money. You're not going to be advertising on Charlotte television. And I don't know if even like WRHI radio is something that gets affordable for you. Because for one thing, it's in Rock Hill. It covers 80% territory that doesn't help you at all. And there's no radio station.
Great group, though. I mean, I've certainly over the years had to be interviewed for various things. When I was York County Bar Association, we brought the Supreme Court in to be heard at. So I was the president, and I got to work with Bev Carroll down at Morton and Getty's, and we went on to be interviewed. So they're wonderful people. I know the main person has recently retired, but they're fantastic folks and really, really get involved in the community. So I'm always happy to go on the radio.
Yep. And YCDP TV.
Yes, I appreciate this very much.
Just trying to pump up the brand here a little bit. The other half of primary elections is for the folks in central York County. So today we're talking to Fort Mill, and soon I will have the candidates on that are in the special primary for state Senate. And the reason we're doing an election for state Senate is that guy you mentioned a minute ago, Wes Clymer, has resigned his state Senate seat in State Senate District 15, and that covers central York. It's got a little bit of the fringe around Rock Hill, and then out to the west. It doesn't cover Clover, but it does cover the town of York, the city of York. And so not everybody in York County is going to be able to vote in that primary, but a substantial number of us will. And that's a Democratic primary because we have two candidates that are vying for that nomination. There's one Republican candidate, so he won't have a primary. And that primary happens September 1st. And it is got actually 2 weeks of early voting. I don't know why the Republican special election, special primary only gets like 3 days of early voting, and the Senate District 15 special primary gets 2 weeks of early voting, but they do. And because that a Republican special primary popped up, the Election Commission changed the early voting location. So heads up, anybody in central York County in Senate District 15, if you had already checked and said, oh, my early voting is going to be at the government center, not going to be there anymore. I've got something I need to do here. I've got a news theme. This is breaking news. It's not quite breaking news. You're not going to be voting at the government center for your 2 weeks of early voting. It is back to two of the three places that we have been using for early voting in York County for the past several elections. And that is a fire station in the city of York. I got to rip that town of York out of my brain. I kept, for the first 5 years I lived here, it was like town of York. And I looked it up, and it's the city of York. It's a small city, but it's the city. So at the fire station there, and then at a Holiday Inn Galleria in Rock Hill, which is not, I don't think it's in the district. It could be on the edge of the district. I haven't looked at it specifically. But if you live somewhere in the 15th district, 15th Senate district, and you work in Rock Hill, it's going to be more convenient for you to vote at that Holiday Inn. So all of that specific addresses and stuff on the York County Democratic Party website. The easiest way to get there, ycdp.us. ycdp.us. The official URL that we've always given out is yorkscdems.org or yorkscdems.com. No one knows how to spell that. A while ago, when Nikita Jackson was first elected as the chair, she was being interviewed on WRHI radio, and and they said, "What's the website for the York County Democratic Party?" And she said, "I think it's yorkcountydemocraticparty.org," which it wasn't. And I was listening to that, and I zipped over to my to the registrar that I got all my website URLs from, and I registered yorkcountydemocraticparty.org real fast and attached it to the website.
Nice.
So
nice.
Just in case anybody heard that and said, okay, now I'm going to check them out. So we got that. That may be the easiest to remember and the hardest to type in. Anyway, we've done our civics for the day.
Yeah. Very important.
Yeah, and your election is not affected. You've been through your primary back in June. You're looking at November 3rd for the general election. You have one Republican, David Martin, the guy that's been in office now for 1 term, 2 terms?
1 term.
Okay. And it's time to talk about what kind of things you want to get done once you're elected.
You got any specific questions, or what do you want to jump into?
Well, let's see. We've got let's look at what you've listed on your website. If I can push all the buttons correctly, folks can get to know you a little bit better. We're going to do the Meet Jenny, find out about your history and growing up and stuff in a little bit. But there's looks like 5 main things on here: safeguard public education, responsible growth and safe development of the town, something that everybody always cares about. Preserve the spirit of Fort Mill. That kind of, not sure exactly what that is. You could tell us what you think about that. And tax dollars that work for you, and then promote safe communities with smarter policing. Is there one of those you want to tackle first?
I mean, the easiest one is the criminal justice system and safeguarding the community, and it all kind of wraps up with smarter policing.
Yeah, because that's where you live.
Right, and it is by far. There's a name on the screen that's not mine.
Push the right button here.
So, being in the criminal justice system, you can see how laws come in and how they practically work. And so a lot of what I've seen over the years is you have these reactionary laws, like something happens, somebody needs to make sense of it. It catches wind and they come in and they convince people, hey, this is a problem, we need to fix it. But like any law, you should start with what exists and build from there. So if you want to address an issue, and it usually comes out obviously in violent crimes. If we've lost somebody, we need to make sense of it. And I understand that to my core. Anytime I've had a loss that's domestic violence related, which is my specialty, especially if it's someone that I knew or someone that did not get something from the system that they needed, for me to keep and get through the trauma weight of it all, or to make it make sense, we've got to do something to analyze it, to fix it. So what did we miss? What can we do differently? And so that's where I live, is what did I see? What was the intention, and what can we do to make it better? And I think that is if people have heard me talk, they hear me talk about performative laws and how it's so problematic. And so that is, if we're wasting our time on things that are not really an issue, but it's a talking point, then we're not really getting into things that we need to address. And so that's the big thing that I would want to go in and tweak and see, if we have this law, what was the intended purpose, and does it actually make its way? Is there the correct amount of funding to make it work? Are there the resources there to get the intended purpose? Is this actually a law that is intended to curb behavior or correct behavior? And so that would be where I would start. And I've got a laundry list of little tweaks based on how the reactive law came into our system, and we need to change something, just tweak it a little bit to make it work the way it was intended to work. So that's the easiest answer, is where my priorities would be. And it's where my heart is, to really educate people on what our system does, keep people safe, build the trust back in our system. And that's any community. And that is, and building the trust between the community and law enforcement. I'm not naive. I see the stuff nationally. I see problems, but we have a good core group of people I've worked with for so long that believe in that community policing. Getting back to Rock Hill did a thing, probably it was before COVID, but there was a community, about 10 community members that came together, and they wanted to make some real changes. So they actually put together an organized list of things that they wanted Rock Hill Police Department to address to really start building that community policing back up. And Rock Hill Police Department went and met with them. And so they worked it out. They built trust in between them, and it really made some big changes into the community. And I would say that, it's, over the years in Fort Mill, our police department has grown exponentially. The previous chief, Jeff Helms, he had grown up with a lot of people in this area, so he had a way of meeting them where they were. And even if things got sidetracked, and there was a lot to be rebuilt, there was some huge problems in the 90s with two particular officers that really just eroded the trust in the system in certain areas of Fort Mill. And so it took a lot, and it's going to be an ongoing thing, because it really takes meeting at tables, discussing issues with people, and understanding where they are and why there might be distrust. And that is a huge thing that we need to do, and kind of build those bridges, because we can't accomplish anything. We can't keep people safe if we can't communicate with each other. So that's the easiest thing that I would say is on my list to do, because it is what I'm most passionate about: helping victims, helping communities, building back trust. So that's
okay.
my first.
So that's one. And I don't want to go through all the others point by point at this point, because we could spend 2 hours doing those. And I don't think that's the most important thing to spend time on.
Okay.
But what this brings to mind for me, though, is that every legislator who goes to either a General Assembly, Congress, various levels of government, brings a certain level of expertise in a certain area, and they are expected to cover and legislate on a very broad area, a broad number of issues. Almost an infinite number of issues are going to be brought before them in the course of a legislative session. So you're probably, I would guess, not wedded to just looking at those few things that you've got on your website and that one thing that's most important. But that's where you can bring some expertise.
Right. No, obviously if you go to do a job and you represent people, you are representing all the people on all the issues. And so that's incredibly important. And if you ask people in our area, and so District 26 is the 29715 area. So if you live in 29715, District 26, that's who I'm running to represent.
Or as I put it when we were doing the other show, my house.
Right. Right.
Because I live within the city limits of Fort Mill, the very north end. I can throw a rock into North Carolina, but I live at the very north end of Fort Mill. So
Right.
you will be my state representative.
I would appreciate your support.
Got it.
Yeah. So obviously, if you depending on who you ask, I mean, we've got the Move SilFab movement, and they're an amazing group of people who are passionate about keeping the community safe and the kids safe, and so they have put 2.5 years into this, and so as I said a couple weeks ago, Jenny Desch is not going to walk in and put my name on that, but I am going to appreciate their expertise, and if a piece of legislation came up that was regarding that, or if there was something that made sense to do, that would be my job, is to take their voice to Columbia. We have a great deal of green space on this side of Fort Mill, and it is precious. It is absolutely precious. And with all the developers coming in, you've got to balance that. Like, how much green space do we want? How much money do we want from developers coming in? And I think we're at capacity. Personally, I think we're at capacity. Once the county approved apartments going in, it just became it just was bubbling at the surface. And then there was the fight over whether or not there should be impact fees. And we keep hearing about the small businesses taking the brunt of our school system. All of those things affect people every day. We've got the electric company now that has to, York Electric Co-op has to buy everything from Duke. Duke is making money off of data centers. So that is something that's going to come down the pike. We've got to be able to address that and what data centers really are. But you also have to understand that it's your county that's giving those permits. And so, there are certain things that the state house reps can do. There's certain things that the statewide reps can do, and there's certain things that county does. And so it's really important to understand how all that works together. And as we've seen in the big hubbub down in Rock Hill, is it really, really requires people to work together, before the issue pops up, not after. And so, yes, you're absolutely right. Like, you've got to be nuanced on all of those things and be ready to represent the people. And I mean, I'm here to listen, and kind of, explain expertise, or listen and then seek expertise depending on what the issue is.
Yeah, you were able to use your expertise to make a Facebook post about SilFab and the court decisions that came down, explaining things that people were missing about what those court decisions mean.
Right.
They didn't mean as much as people hoped they would.
Right. Right.
So,
and I will say that the group has completely, analyzed, and they're getting the message out, and they're still fundraising, and they're still trying to bring attention to it. But yeah, those things, when you hear an answer, especially in a blurb or a Facebook post, it could seem like, oh, we won, or oh, we lost, but it really is, it's so nuanced. And so you do need an expertise to explain. And sometimes it's just managing expectations. Like, the fight isn't over yet, but this is a good sign, and this is what we can build on.
Yeah. The devil's in the details, always in those details.
Right.
The town council of Fort Mill doesn't have anything to say about it because SilFab is outside of the Fort Mill city limits, just barely, but it is outside just a little bit. So county council has more to say about it. A variety of different government organizations.
The school board just came out with a statement, which I thought was incredibly good. So they were on top of it.
Yeah. How does the interaction between various governmental levels, county, state representatives, how does that really work?
How does it work, or how should it work?
Okay. Yes.
So how should it work is that, the biggest thing we can do is understand that everybody has a motivation. And so when whatever I'm doing, whether it's meeting with victims in a criminal case, or meeting with law enforcement, or arguing to a jury, or even meeting with opposing counsel, or anything I'm doing, I try to meet people where they are. And nobody's perfect, right? Like, I'm not perfect, nobody's perfect, but trying to meet people where they are, that means I need to, like, I might have motivations as to what I'm doing, but I have to understand the other party does as well. And so when you look at something where it's a Rock Hill City, a school board, and York County all have a stake in the outcome, it does help to understand that the other person has a motivation. It doesn't mean you have to completely acquiesce to it, but the very thing we should be doing is sitting down at a table before it becomes an issue, trying to anticipate what is going to come up. And with money, there's always going to be something that comes up. And then you sit down and you figure out, okay, how can we best meet everyone's needs as best as possible? Again, it's not perfect, but that should be the starting point, is communicating and collaborating. And that's what I don't see. I don't see a lot of collaboration. I don't see it locally. I don't see it state. I certainly don't see it federally. We don't collaborate. We work in silos. And that is incredibly problematic.
So when you were elected, that's going to be one of the things you're going to try to do, is to drag everybody to the table?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. When I wanted to get stuff done while working in York County, I couldn't just bombard people and say, this is the way to do it. I went to the people that had a stake in it, and we sat down, and the first thing is, hey, this is what I want to do. What do you think? Like, how would this affect you? And it was most notable when we got the domestic violence laws, when they had this big task force and they came down with all these recommendations. And, South Carolina is notably terrible at addressing domestic violence. We're in the top 10, and not for the right reasons. And so
wrong top 10.
Right, wrong top 10. And there was so many experts at the table. And again, nothing was perfect coming out of it, but it was the first time we really had some meaningful discussion about how to address, what domestic violence was or intimate partner violence was, and how do we address it. And so from that task force, every area got a list of things, and York County, because of how proactive we got part of that. We were listed in the task force, enumerated number of things that we could do. And so and Solicitor Brackett was so trusting of what I could bring with expertise as one of his employees. And I spent a year and a half just sitting around tables with bond judges, with advocates, with law enforcement, with community members, with Safe Passage. And so we sat around, and each person, we had meetings and said, okay, how does this affect you? If we made these changes, what does that practically look like to you? And then we sat down and said, okay, what tweaking can we do? And we completely revamped how we did domestic violence in York County. And it made a huge difference. And I've seen it going to another county or another circuit. It really is, everybody had a stake in it. And when they were part of the conversation, it meant more. And so we accomplished more. And that's, you got to work in that way. You can't just think that your way is the only way. It's just not effective.
Can you be a little specific about what that way of dealing with domestic violence is? I am so fortunate. I have never had any of that in my life. I guess most people don't, but if you do, it's horrible. And so as the prosecutor and as the court system, how was it handled, and how did you improve it?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is when you don't have any experience in it, you have a preconceived notion. Everybody that I would hear this all the time in the courtroom. I would hear somebody say, "Oh, if my husband hit me, you'd never hear from him again." And of course, they were being facetious, but the reality was they could say that because they had never been in a position where it was a problem. They knew their husband wasn't going to hurt them. And so it really is. So anybody who came in, or anybody who downplayed an incident or didn't show up or returned to a relationship, it's a very judgmental situation. Like, well, I wouldn't have done that. So I'm judging that person for doing it. But the reality is there are so many layers to why people return to relationships. Some it's a learned behavior, some it's a no other resources. And in York County, very specifically, we have so many different, such a vast amount of differences in one county alone. If you're out in the western side of the county, you could have one house on 25 acres. And then you come here to Fort Mill or TK or Baxter, and you've got maybe 25 houses on 1 acre. And so it's a completely different, same county council, but different situations in the same county. And so if something happened in Fort Mill and you needed help, you could walk to a neighbor. If something happens out in the middle of the country, you don't necessarily have the ability to just walk to a neighbor. And then you get into just layers and layers and layers of what you've learned. So long ago, there was, if something happens to you, don't tell people about it. That's your obligation. You stay. You chose that relationship, you stay in it, or you don't have another choice. And so when we were really addressing, the first thing we had to figure out is why, what red flags do we see? And so when the experts get together, they talk about a pattern of behavior, of this controlling behavior. And that can be emotional, financial, isolation, controlling behavior. And that is much more problematic. That is the red flag that you really should be looking at, as opposed to, I'm angry at you for doing something and I react by hitting you. That's different. And so the first thing we had to do is identify those issues, and then really set it up in the way we set it up is a spectrum, understanding the spectrum of what we're dealing with, and then intervening quickly. The very first thing we did is address, when I said we sat down with bond judges, we sat down with bond judges and we went over what their options were, and the presumption is giving bail, for instance. So you're presumed innocent when you're arrested, and the bond judge has to analyze within 24 hours what will keep the community safe and what will guarantee somebody showing up to court. Okay, that seems easy, right? But it's not, because you don't get a lot of information other than the input from law enforcement or the victim and a criminal history. So they've got to make an analysis. So if you have someone in a controlling relationship who has never called law enforcement, there's no record of it. So that person that's standing in front of the court for the first time, if the judge is looking at criminal behavior or charges to see a pattern of behavior, if it's not reported, it doesn't exist. And so there had to be other ways. So the first thing we did with bond court is educate the bond judges on what, getting their input, and then going over what their options were and what they were comfortable with, and then bringing them a part of the conversation with the advocates who were with law enforcement and advocates, what they were doing. So we changed. When law enforcement was called out to a domestic violence situation, the advocates got on the phone with the victim immediately. They went over the history. They went over what we call a lethality assessment. And it was really getting the background to say, like, what are we dealing with here? Is this an isolated incident? Is this reactive? Or is this a pattern that we hadn't seen before? And then all that information was given to the bond judge. And then all that information was given to us as solicitors. And the idea is we hit it quickly, we hit it thoroughly. And by the time I, as the attorney, was looking at the information from law enforcement, I got my case within a couple days. I had input from 911. That moment in like hearing what was actually going on the scene, I had a lethality assessment. I had advocate input. They gave it from their advocate to our advocates. And so if a victim called me on day 4 and said, hey, I really need my husband home for various reasons. I can't afford to live on my own, or whatever it may be, I could come in, we could sit down, and we could have a real meaningful conversation about what the needs were. And we cut out some of those hurdles because they didn't have to come in and repeat everything into me. If I'm doing my homework, then I already know it. So now they can tell me about their needs, why they might need them home, what their resources are, how they get around, if they have a job, if they're isolated, if it's a reactive event. And now we've taken out that middle ground where the choices are jail or dismissal. And that's where you really should be. You should be able to analyze quickly what the real dangers are, also having that human contact to understand what this person needs. And once we started doing that, you started building the trust. When someone came in and said, oh, okay, like I don't want my husband to go to jail for various reasons, and I really just need help, or whatever it may be. Now we had the flexibility to intervene purposely. Also talk to probation. So we were aligned with a program that intervened quickly. And then we also built a diversion program, which had to be very, very, very carefully analyzed, and comply with the rules, that there are certain rules, and I'm happy to get into them. But essentially the quick answer is you can't have a diversion program if it's stalking and harassing because of what's called Mary Lynn's Law. So all of those things were done at the same time. And so now we had a true spectrum based on the needs of the individual people. And also it it meant accountability for the offender too. And offender accountability means changing behavior, addressing. So if an offender is an offender because they grew up in a violent home, we now had the ability to analyze that. We built trust with defense attorneys. The offender could be analyzed from, hey, I did wrong, but I also now know what it is that I need to correct. And now there's a program for it. And that's those wraparound services and quick intervention is how we made all the difference in the world.
So that is something you had to leave behind you as you went down to Columbia. Still working? How are you getting feedback on it?
I mean, things morph over time and priorities change, but I mean, it's the premise is still there. I mean, the folks that still work in special victims, it's ingrained in them to do the right thing and help people. And so as long as our resources are there, they're going to do the right thing and meet with community partners, and do their best to keep the idea of it going.
Yeah. Have any other South Carolina counties adopted that as a model?
To some degree, yes. I mean, I think they adopt it to how their county works. It worked incredibly well for our county, because it's a smaller county with resources. And so we were able to put in some things that worked well. And our solicitor's relationship with the sheriff was good. Law enforcement relationship with the community was good. Not to say everything is perfect. Nothing is perfect, but they worked well together. If we applied for grants, we'd be sitting around the table with everybody that's a stakeholder and figuring out how, we would do memorandums of agreement ahead of time. So we did approach county council to say, hey, this is a grant we're applying for and it requires a match. Everybody was on the same page. I don't know that every other county works that way. And of course the resources are different. If you've got a lot of those rural counties, they're spread wide and the resources are just different. You don't have transportation issues. Duffy Stone, who's a solicitor in the Fourth Circuit, he has a family justice center. And so the idea of wraparound services and removing hurdles, that is something that he's tried to work over the years. So people will adjust as they can.
Yeah. So I think for the people watching, what you've got, first of all, is a lot of detail. But second, the idea of what kind of detail in digging in and solving problems that you can expect with Jenny as your legislator, as your state representative. I want to get to some of your background before we use up the time and are still talking here when you're supposed to be going down to Baxter.
I got some time. I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good.
Yeah. So one more question about politics, just sort of a general one. All we hear on the news, most of what we hear, social media and everything else, is the culture war stuff that comes out of Columbia. Now you don't sit in committees in the legislature. You get to see some of it, but you don't get to sit there every day. That is not most of what goes on, I don't think. Most of the time, they're just actually doing business. And when you go down there, you're not going for the culture wars.
No, absolutely not. I think it's a distraction.
Yeah. I mean, there will be a few legitimate issues that come up and there'll be things to vote on, things like that. But you'll need to spend most of your time actually solving government issues, figuring out what to do.
That's what we should be there for, is solving government issues. But I do think it helps to identify what those issues are. I do think some of my concern over the last session that we had is that there was too many performative bills that were argued. One made it across the finish line, a bunch didn't. It doesn't mean to say that they won't be brought back up in January. But some of those were problematic because it's distracting from what should be done. And I think some of it is, there are some people that truly believe that's how we should exist, or not exist for that matter. but it really just, it's talking points that get people's attention, but it's distracting. It's taking away from real issues that we should address. And there was plenty of things that were proposed that could have had bipartisan support to pass, but we wasted a lot of time arguing over these culture wars or these performative laws. And I really hope that there's a time that we get past that. Um, and it really we only get past it when the people voting understand that that's what it is and step up and say, I'm tired of the noise. I'm tired of all this stuff. This is a real issue. I mean, something like gas prices being through the roof, roads still breaking apart. These are everyday issues. The electric bills going through, utilities going through the roof. I mean, these are the things that are affecting people, grocery prices. And so there are ways that we could be dealing with that, and that should be bipartisan. And yet we can get easily distracted. So we need to get past all that. We need to stop talking about things that are just clickbait and really get into what the issues are, identifying them and talking about real solutions.
Yeah. Now, in order to get elected, you are not going to be able to rely solely on the Democratic bloc. And that's not who you're looking for either. I mean, you need them, you want them, but you need a broader base.
Yes.
One of the things that I'm thinking of is that most down ballot candidates get elected based on a straight ticket vote. I think that's true. I think it's becoming more true, and it is a hard thing to fight. People who are thinking that they want to vote for you, but they push the Republican straight ticket ballot, they're not going to get to vote for you. Your name will disappear down the ballot. How do you fight the straight ticket thing?
I mean, aside from legislating it out of a possibility,
Yeah, for this election, because there's where we are.
Obviously it's become an issue. It's become an issue. So how do I deal with it? I mean, I just talk to as many people as possible. And I've said several times and to my core, I mean, like if I'm representing 29715 or District 26, I'm representing everybody. And I've shown that for 25 years. I don't believe in picking battles because people support me. When I'm prosecuting and I meet a victim, I'm meeting a victim in the worst part of their life. I'm not going to sit down and say, well, where do you stand politically? I mean, that's ridiculous. So I don't think we should legislate that way. If someone comes to me with a problem, I'm going to sit down and listen because, I believe in what I believe in because of my life experience and what I've had to go through and what I'm passionate about. But that doesn't mean I know the answer to everything. So if somebody else with a different life experience comes to talk to me, it is my job to listen to them and go, oh, I didn't realize when we were discussing this issue that it affected you in that way. And so it's my job and also giving back to, okay, I hear you. This is what it actually means. Like when we're talking about a ruling from a judge, for instance, those are things that my expertise to talk to the community, but also listen to the community on what they need. And that's incredibly important. So no, I don't want to limit, of course I want everybody that is registered to vote for me. I want people who have not registered yet. I want them to be impassioned enough about what's going on to register. The kids that are coming out of high school, the now new adults, the 18 to 24, they are experiencing a completely different life than I had. They've grown up in this area of only knowing the politics of the last 10 to 15 years. That's been their whole life. It's been a reality show to them, as opposed to a time where we had, long before 9/11, where we had disagreements over policy, but respectful disagreements. And so when I look at politics, I want to get back to respectful disagreements, but it's a different way to get the attention of those that are just coming into it. They are not identifying with Republican or Democrat. And so it really is making them understand, like, you're not affiliated. You don't want to be affiliated. You're learning about information and you're getting passionate about things. But we are still in a two-party system. So it really is just saying, like, okay, take the two-party system out of it. Your issues are this. I'm listening to this, and I can be a voice for you in Columbia and I want you standing right next to me to do it. So I'm looking for you to vote for Jenny Desch, right? And so I've got to make them like get their passion enough to vote for Jenny Desch, not just clicking a button. My law enforcement buddies, I've worked with them side by side and gone into the trenches with them. And so of course I want them to support me, because that's the passion. But I think if you traditionally looked at where they would vote, if they're voting, you hear the GOP candidates say, I back the blue. But backing the blue is more than just saying I back the blue. It's because that can have connotations of its own. Like I walked alongside of, I did patrols with these guys. I went into it. We talked about it and built trust with them. So if there was something that we needed to do, I was listening to their concerns and also being a voice for the community back or for victims back. And so you got to build that trust. And that's what I did for 20 years for here. So of course I want them to support me. The community itself, I want to walk the streets and make sure that they understand, like, in a community that might not trust law enforcement, what does that mean? I am a prosecutor. So by and large, if they don't trust the system, they're going to think, should I trust a prosecutor? Well, the only thing I can do is sit down with them and listen to them. And again, I don't want them voting for me just because that's how they've always voted. I want them voting for me because Jenny Desch can listen and help and be a voice that they need. The only way I know to fight the down ballot or the hitting the button is to really just sit down and meet as many people as I can and get the word out that, whatever the issue is, we all live in the same community. We all have the same public schools, and there's a concern about that. We all have the greenways. We all have overcrowding. We all have gas prices that are high. We all have grocery prices that are high. And that's the only way I know to do it, is to get out there and say, like, I am not I want to talk to people and really get to know them on a level and answer questions as best as possible.
I pulled a bumper sticker out of that. Jenny Desch, streetwalker.
Oh,
I'm
all proud of that one.
might not quite work. I was at the dentist yesterday. I got my teeth cleaned. And first of all, I wanted to say that that was an unfair question to ask of you. How do you solve the straight ticket thing? That isn't up to you to solve. That is up to us, the voters, to solve, to talk to our neighbors, to find all those people, find those people that just vote straight ticket. I don't care whether it's Democrat or Republican, and say, pay attention to the individual candidates, the down ballot candidates. That's what we're sitting here talking about here on this episode. And for most of them is the down ballot candidates. Get to know these folks. So I was at the dentist yesterday and talking to the hygienist, and she said, well, what you doing this weekend? And I said, I'm doing a podcast. Oh yeah, what about? Oh, minefield. In the general public, minefield, because a Democratic Party podcast in York County. This is somebody who is going to be sticking sharp implements into my mouth. And, well, I trust her to be absolutely professional. If she happened to be, and I have no idea what her politics are, if she happened to be MAGA, I don't want that interrupting her concept. What her focus and her intention as she is working inside my mouth on my teeth. So I did not reveal which party we're talking about here. But afterwards, I did ask her to participate in a short focus group of one person and said, where do you get your news? Do you watch local news? No. And she volunteered that she's 38, 39, I think. So it's not a kid, but from my perspective at 76, she's a young person. Do you watch local news? No. Do you watch YouTube? No. We're from TikTok? No. She doesn't want politics in her life. She push all that stuff away, listens to her Spotify playlist, and she's happy. And I said, well, but she said, but I vote. Well, how do you decide who to vote for? Well, I do my own research. I try to find places that give me independent, nonpartisan, not leaning one way or the other information on candidates. I don't know where those places are. maybe they exist out there. League of Women Voters will have their website, but the information they have is what you supply them, not one of their people that comes up with something and tries to, balance out everybody's issues. So anyway, that's the focus group of one of those folks out there. And she's probably in Mecklenburg County anyway, so we don't have to worry about her.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I hear that actually.
Yeah. It is up to us to get people off of the straight ticket. South Carolina is one of the few states that still has straight ticket voting. North Carolina got rid of it a long time ago. It's probably a bad thing. Okay, so moving on.
Okay.
You're an Air Force brat.
I am an Air Force brat.
You grew up around the world, primarily, I guess, in Philippines.
Yes. Middle school and high school, I was in the Philippines on Clark Air Base.
Yeah. How did that shape your growing up? That must have been very different from what the rest of us experience.
Of course. But it was, it's also, giving my age away a little bit. It was the 80s. So it was good.
Yeah, you're still a young kid for me.
It was good and bad because, a lot of the cultural phenomenon of the 80s, we were missing because we didn't have TV, we didn't have commercials. And so a lot of that MTV culture, we were just getting bits and pieces of it when we come home for the summer because my mom and stepfather were teachers. And so we would come home to visit family over the summer and I would see all the things. But when we were in the Philippines, it was, we were outside playing with people, hanging out. We weren't watching TV. There was not a lot of stuff that we would get. And so, it's just a different upbringing. It was also a time where we were around each other all the time. It was a small high school, very diverse high school, every combination you could think of, every background, but we did not have any of the, I don't want to say not have racial tensions, but it was not prevalent, or at least I was not as aware of it because, we had each other. There was maybe, I think 800 total. And so we were just out on the soccer field or the basketball court or playing golf or swimming on weekends. And so we were just interacting all the time.
Yeah, I think everybody starts with the sort of you don't look like me starting point. And then once you get to know someone, that doesn't make a difference anymore. That's
right.
It disappears.
Right. Yeah.
So I guess the question is, did you grow up American or more international?
Of course, international. I mean, we went off the base all the time. There was 3 years that I lived off the base. And so we called it on the economy. And we would go in and the Philippines was amazing. I mean, the whole structure of having an Air Force base, and the Air Force base was huge. I mean, it would take me 25 minutes to get from the gate to school. We had 7 pools, 3 clubs, like Officers Club and, Airmen's Club and all that. We had an art center. So, I mean, I had exposure to everything. I could go to a teen center. We had teen dances. I mean, it was just a really nice environment. We had grocery stores and we knew that if we wanted to get, up to date things, we went from the Air Force base 2 hours to the Navy base because they had a better BX. All the, if we went down to play sports, they'd let us shop. If we played sports against the teams in Manila, we would go to the malls down there. I mean, that was amazing. We'd go to the malls because they had all the cool stuff. And but funny story, if you wanted to, you had to buy toilet paper to go to the bathroom. You had to, for like a square was a peso. So you always had to have money on you. But it was just amazing, So
that is an incredibly sexist thing. A guy came up with that concept.
Yeah. So, but
one toilet paper lasts me a year. It lasts my wife a week.
Right. But, we had to have money on us. But in the community, the community around Angeles City had built up around the base. And so around our base, there was what we would be the equivalent of a main street. So right outside of the gates of the base would be what looked like, if you envision Fort Mill Main Street, that's what it looked like. But it was people who were seamstresses. We had, things that were handmade, and it was just amazing because there was such a level of talent. when we had our sports uniforms, they were made for us every year by seamstresses. If we went in to go buy music, they would build. You could build and this again, aging myself, the cassette holders, like the wooden cassette holders, that would be made for us, and we could go shop and buy cassettes and as things went, I don't how long ago, it was probably VHS tapes and cassettes still. So it really and all the establishments outside, that catered to the young airmen that came over. I mean, it was just this really simpatico relationship between the community, and it was beneficial to them because we spent money. It was beneficial to us because we had a sense of community. But yeah, so it was very interesting. And did I grow up American? I mean, I was on an Air Force base, of course. We stood at attention for reveille. We had the Pledge of Allegiance. Lee Greenwood came one year. We had the big event we had every year was the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders came to perform for us. I will note I'm an Eagles fan, so that was problematic in and of itself. But everybody else loved the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. That was the American team in the 80s. And so yes, we had a bit of Americana, but I still to this day remember when Lee Greenwood came. And back then,
that is Trump's official.
right.
Official.
Back then in the 80s, he was not linked to any political movement. And I'm disappointed, frankly, I'm disappointed that it's linked to any movement now. But back then, he just came to entertain the troops. And I remember.
And if he would be singing, "I'm proud to be an American," you could all feel that way.
Right.
Today, we are culturally divided. When we hear that, we unfortunately have to go, "No, I'm not."
Yeah.
Well, yes, I am, but not the way you're thinking of it.
Right. And that has been a big problem, and something that is like, it's just so disappointing, because when I heard it in the 80s, I remember turning, and it was the movie theater, the whole place was full, and it was all these people. And it didn't matter what they looked like, if they were the Filipino wife of an airman, or the high school kids, or the teachers. It was just an entire room full of people that looked and were from different backgrounds and looked different, but everybody was standing there and all had one thought, and it was it was, we are proud to be around, because it was the true melting pot. And that's what being an American is the true melting pot. And so there was this sense of community. And now we don't have that. And it's just so problematic that religion and patriotism has been co-opted by one side. And I think what we're seeing is now bringing it back and really just kind of redefining, because there was a point where being American meant that we just loved everybody around us, and we came together to do what was right. And so, that's obviously changed, and it's disappointing, but I didn't feel that on an Air Force base in the middle of nowhere. And, and it really formed a lot of where I come from, is getting back to that, and accepting people for what they bring to the table.
Yeah. Trump didn't invent making the divisions, but he has exaggerated it incredibly. And I think once he's gone, we can start getting back to people being a little bit more forgiving and appreciating each other, and not being stuck with those big divisions. I still like the idea of America being a mixing bowl rather than a melting pot. I don't want everybody to merge their culture into one polyglot in the middle. I like everybody to maintain their culture and maintain the fact that, yes, we are all Americans and we are all living here, and we keep our cultures individual and side by side, and appreciate them rather than have to sort of melt them all together. If we melt them all together, I know which way the MAGA folks want to melt them all together. They want everybody to be white, and white and middle class and suburban, and that's not the way we all are. So,
right. And I think you see that most when you get into music and art and creativity. You see that there really is this conglomeration of culture, and we all appreciate that, right? Like if you got a bunch of kids together, regardless of what they look like, they're listening to music, and they might not realize where those inspirations come from, but they love it. They're playing it, they're dancing to it, they're singing to it, they're putting it in their TikTok videos. And so if we just realize that, like, it's got to be more than music or creativity or food or any of those things. It really is a huge benefit that, that people that have different experiences can really make things flourish and just better your life. And I've learned that, and I've grown so long. I mean, even from law school, I had some preconceived notions, and coming back to the States for the first time after living overseas, I had to learn some things. And
that was going to be my question. Culture shock?
It was a culture shock. It really was. And so it's like I didn't know where I fit in, and I will say 30 years later, there's times that I don't really know where to fit in, because I am so comfortable in rooms with people that have different backgrounds than me. But there's preconceived notions. Like, if you don't know me or you don't trust me, you're not going to open up around me because of the kind of looking at what I bring to the table. And so it really does take listening, and everybody, I'm sure I said things in law school or made arguments that I didn't realize how they were heard. And so, that's what you learn over life. You say something based on your experience, and then you see the reaction, and you go, oh, okay, tell me what that sounded like to you. Like, tell me why, and so those communications really require the give and take, and being in rooms of people that have a different background than you.
Yeah, most people never get to that question. It's,
yeah.
I heard what you said and I'm offended. Goodbye.
Right. But I think, you have to have those hard conversations. You have to have those uncomfortable moments, but also don't run away from those uncomfortable moments. Like, I think that's what's easy about social media is you can fire something off and it doesn't matter. Like, you can fire off just this horribly cruel comment and then close the book, right? You don't have to look at it again. You don't have to see somebody hurting.
You've been watching my Facebook feed.
Yeah. And it's hard not to respond, right? Like, I hear some of the stuff. One, there's a whole lot of information out where people don't know the facts. They don't know they don't know their civics lesson. They don't know the facts. They're listening to sound bites and they really don't know how it works. And some of it is so obvious. And yet they just double down on what it said. But there's no confrontation in the moment. So you don't need to correct your behavior. You don't need to correct it. And so I think if we can get back to one-on-one and talking to each other, not behind the keyboard, I think some of these issues will work itself out. But you have to have the hard conversations to do it.
And one of those begins at 3:00 today in Baxter at, what was it, Pet Peeve?
Pet Peeve, right in front of the fish market.
Yeah, you're going to be there. A couple other candidates are going to be there. I know Beth Hart said she's going to be there. Beth Hart is
Heather Hart. Heather Hart is She's amazing. She's so easy to talk to. Really, really worth stopping by and just meet her. She's wonderful.
Yep. I'm not sure who else is going to be there, but probably several other candidates. When they call it drinking liberally, it doesn't mean you have to start drinking at 3:00. You don't have to start drinking at all. I am a recovering alcoholic. I've been to drinking liberally. No one is trying to force a beer in my hand. There's more eating liberally than actually drinking liberally, I think.
Right.
And it's a comfortable place to be. People, when I was not telling that hygienist what my politics were, at drinking liberally, no problem. The liberally part is not a lot. It is political. It's where we fit in. And if you are a Republican and anything but the hardest diehard MAGA, you're welcome there. They'll love to come talk to you. So it's not, these days, it's not Trump's dreaded Communist Party that's taking over. Yeah, why don't you run as a Democratic Socialist? I got a great idea for you. That's going to work well here in York County in South Carolina. From the chat, one whole question has popped up. O. Lacana, who's been watching us for the whole show, wants to know what differentiates you from David Martin. I don't really know David Martin that well. He's been my state senator for a long time.
He's been your House rep for 2 years. And before that,
right,
I mean,
right.
yeah. So, and
don't worry. I'm only the host of the political show for YCDP, and I can't remember one representative from another. Yeah, he's the District 26 state representative. He's the incumbent.
yep.
And
Yep.
we really don't hear much from him. I could dig it out, but I haven't. So tell me about him.
So David and I are friends. It's funny that, we say that, we've talked for years. He's a lawyer in town. And what makes me different is that we're in a moment, we have to meet the moment. And I think, one thing I hear is, there's two different things to be the House rep. One is to do what's best for your community here. You've got to take that information in. You've got to understand what the needs are in Fort Mill, but you're also Fort Mill's voice in Columbia. And I think what people may not realize is that a lot of the stuff that's going on in Columbia, it might not seem like it affects us, but if some of these more extreme, very extreme laws come into play, if they get passed, then it will affect us. And it'll affect us negatively on top of what's already affecting us negatively. And so right now there's a supermajority. So we keep putting, like, the whole place has, the whole state has, the GOP reps are enough that you don't ever have a Democratic voice, ever. So they can make laws and decide policy for the entire state without taking a diverse viewpoint. And that's the problem. And so if what we see is what they're calling the rhinos versus the Freedom Caucus, and there's some infighting. And so, David's been very public about not being supported by York County GOP. That came out in the primary. He does not want that, not to speak for him, but he was very clear that he is a person that is not associated with that Freedom Caucus. The problem becomes,
and we should mention the York County GOP has been taken over by the extreme MAGA right.
Right.
Yeah,
And so,
they are.
And I'm speaking for him. This is just things that came out during the primary. And so, but the difference is when those issues, when the Freedom Caucus or the extreme right issues get put on the floor, the Republicans are all voting the same, right? So that's the difference between me and David. That's the main difference.
So he'll still vote their way, even though he doesn't. He doesn't.
And I'm not saying, like, I pride myself in listening to people. So if there's an issue that the GOP brings to the table, and it is the right thing to do, and it's what's best for my community, I'm going to sit down at the table and vote with what is best for this community. But the difference is that if it's something that we need to put in place or stop from being put in place, I can have those hard conversations, and I'm not tied to anything. I'm not forced to be in a position where I have to vote that way, or I'm going to get kicked out, or I'm going to get talked about. I'm going to do what's best for the area. And I think that really came out in the redistricting. There is absolutely no reason that anybody in Fort Mill, state Senate or House, should have voted for redistricting. We were getting split. Our district was going to be split. Fort Mill split in half. We were going to lose the majority of the federal district. There is no one in Fort Mill that should have agreed to that.
Yeah, Lancaster County was going to be cleaved off of this district, and we were going to be attached to that.
Right. And then David went on and said, this is why I did this. He could have easily voted for what was best for Fort Mill and not said anything at all. He should have, in my opinion, that's the time where you step up and you have that hard conversation with your own caucus. Hey, guys, I understand, but in this particular case, what's best for Fort Mill is for me to vote no to redistricting. And instead he voted yes and justified it, because
what was his justification?
Get it done, right? The word on high. We've had more people going up to DC in the last year than ever, because South Carolina always was very individual, very states' rights, right? Like, that's what we were founded on. And if you follow South Carolina history, It's all about states' right above anything else. In fact, that's why that they learned about the Civil War being about states' rights.
Yeah.
And when redistricting came down, when it was so incredibly important for York County and Fort Mill specific not to be split, they went up and came back down and stood on the floor and said, we were told to get this done.
Yeah, that map was not generated in South Carolina. It was sent to us.
It didn't even match. And so that's when that's when the difference becomes. Like in those moments that could be the one time you stand up and say, this is what's best for Fort Mill. And really explaining, because if I were in that position, I could have easily explained, you know why? Because Fort Mill belongs together. We are better together. And also, you want to split off where right now in our federal House seat, we have 40% is York County. And if it had been moved the way that they were proposing it, we would have had a tiny sliver. And that means the person representing that district was suddenly going to have the bigger voice. And so now we're looking at what is best. And we are not like the rest. There are similarities. I mean, certainly the growth in Lancaster and Indian Land and all that, that's part of where we are now. But we had 40% and we were going to lose it. So it would have been very easy for either one of the Fort Mill reps and the House rep to say, no, sorry, what's best for Fort Mill is what's best for Fort Mill. And that was the moment. And so if you want to know what's different is that I have no problem standing up for what is right for Fort Mill.
Yeah. And not to mention that whole maps idea was to eliminate the one Democratic congressional district from South Carolina.
Yeah.
And make it 7 Republican.
Would have made 2 others vulnerable. I mean, it really could have. It could have made them vulnerable. And so I think there was people on the Senate side that knew that and understood it. Again, it really is, is the map the way it should be? I mean, it has withstood constitutional muster. It was not done the way it should be, which is the census. The numbers are changing. When the census comes out, there will be another redistricting, but it will be done in a way that's fair and transparent, and the public will have a say in it. And that's not what happened when they tried to push it through before the primary.
Yeah. Come back and we'll do a gerrymandering show.
Absolutely.
We can do an hour and a half on gerrymandering, I think. Right. So once you got back, how old were you when you came back from Philippines?
I came back for college.
Okay. And then you reintegrated yourself into American society culture-wise. Did you learn another language?
When I was younger, we lived in Germany, and we moved over there when I was 3.5. And we lived on the economy. We lived in a little farm town.
That's a good age to learn another language.
Yeah, it was perfect. So my mom says that I didn't really speak for about 6 months, and then suddenly I was fluent. But I was fluent in our dialect in our little farm town. And so I would just go out, and we lived there for 3 years, and I lived in this farm town and played with everybody. And when I was school age, I went on the base to go to elementary school. But other than that, I was out on the economy with all the little German kids. And so we went around. Unfortunately, when I came back to the States, I had no one to talk to. And when I went to school and I learned book German, it wasn't the same. And so, over the years,
so you cheated. You took German in school because you were going to get an easy A.
I actually did better on the test when I was reading it. I knew what the origin of the word was, and so I tested way higher than I should have. And then when I had to speak it, I didn't really. And my German teacher in high school was actually my golf coach. So I did not learn Tagalog when we were in the Philippines, but I knew enough that if we went shopping, I knew how to haggle prices, and I knew where to ask where the bathroom was. I knew how to order food, but yeah, it was we learned enough to get by, but it was just different.
Yeah, in those years in the Philippines, was English still a common language among at least shopkeepers and
especially around us, because they were catering to the American servicemen.
Yeah,
but I mean that's across the board. I think people who don't have international experience don't realize how much we can go into another culture and communicate, because Most people in international schools or in other countries are learning 2, 3, 4 different languages.
Yeah, and English is almost always one of them.
English is almost always one of them. And so, it is incredibly easy to travel. I would encourage people to go overseas. Don't get wrapped up in what you think it means. It really is just worth going out and seeing how other cultures are, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, I have been fortunate enough now to do some European traveling. It's all been in the past 10 years. Before that, I rarely left the U.S. other than, Canada, and that was about it. And so we've been through Germany and France, and just spent 2 weeks in Switzerland. And what I can say, at least about Europe, is that almost the only thing different than living here is the language. Everything else, I mean, yes, they have their cultures, but you're very comfortable in mixing in with the local people. Most of the, if you travel, unless you make a specific effort to talk to people who live where you are traveling through, you're going to live the tourist experience, which is restaurants and shopkeepers, and that's about it. So occasionally we would meet people out biking and hiking and stuff, and have fun conversations. And yes, they speak English as well as I do, or better. And that was eye-opening in all of the America First stuff and how much greater it is here. No, it's really no different. It's about the same.
Right. I mean, it's very interesting to hear this America First, because obviously that was a big part of what led to the Nazi Germany, was this America First. And obviously, if you pay attention, you know that the America First movement makes us vulnerable. And hopefully people are starting to learn. It does amaze me that we have smartphones in our hand and we could study anything in the world, and what we watch is hilarious cat videos. Anybody could have access to any number of sites overseas that could really give the history. So I'm disappointed that there's now warning signs in Smithsonian, which again, Smithsonian is historic and accurate. It's disappointing that history is being brought down in the United States, but it really should prompt people to look at outside sources to really find our history, and really study it, because it is repeating itself. I mean, right now we're in the McCarthy movement, where this Red Scare it's picking up across the board, and
that is the bizarre.
But it repeats itself, right? Like what I've tried to make myself feel better is like, okay, this is the cycle we're in. We're starting, when the administration came back, and Stephen Miller and all those guys, Heritage in 2025 and all that, we're just back to, 1913, 14 in the 30s, we're getting all this. And it's like, okay, how did Nazi Germany form? How did the United States get involved in this? And so you can study that. And so then now we're moving in, through the 40s and the war, and now we're coming into the 50s where we had McCarthyism. But the problem is McCarthyism, Nixon, all the things that went sideways in all of that generation, it was fixed within, right? It wasn't in Nixon, it wasn't the Democratic Party that came and said, dude, you can't do that. It was his own people.
McCain.
People came and said, you can't do this.
Yeah, Goldwater. I guess Goldwater was the
right. And so
senator that said no.
Right. And I think we started to have that in the last Trump administration. We had people that had put the guidelines in. We don't have that anymore. And that's what's scary, is that we don't have enough people within the circle or within the party that is coming up. And those that have stood up were ousted quickly. I mean, you saw it, first with Liz Cheney. There's no one that's my age or older that would have ever thought that Liz Cheney would not have been one of the leaders in the party, if not one of the first presidential nominees from the GOP. But because she stood up for what was right and truthful and ethical, she was ousted. And so, it really does take pushing back on disinformation. And I just encourage people to do that. Not that it has anything to do with my race. My personal opinions have nothing to do with how I would help people here. It's just, disinformation hurts everybody. And we really need to get back to, if somebody comes to me with an issue, they've got to trust me enough that they will be heard and how it affects us. And so we've got to start with kind of getting away from this disinformation, getting back to being able to talk about things that are based in fact. And that's how we start getting the movement to get back to, how we got to fix everyday things like our property taxes, our gas prices, our grocery prices.
Yeah.
The fact that we can't, how many people are not eating lettuce right now because they're worried about the inability to address the problem, and the
inability to get to a bathroom fast enough.
Right? I mean, it's, we should be able to trust information. And so again, you got a smartphone in your hand. You can look at, and if you're worried about the CDC, go into the Canadian equivalent of the CDC or look at something. And like I say, if I'm looking out the window and it's sunny outside, but I tell you it's raining, I want you to call me out on it. It's the facts have got to be there. It's sunny because it's sunny and the sun is out. If it's raining, then my only answer should be it's raining. Now I can have a different perspective if it's pouring versus drizzling, but I mean, those are just simple things that we need to get back to.
Yeah. I can see you have passions. You have, I guess we can even call it ideology to some extent, but you are not ideological, and those will not drive what you do when you get to the General Assembly.
I am a public servant, and to my core, it's what I believe in: helping people, identifying issues, solving problems.
Okay, everybody. Let's see. I can barely read my own screen. It is Desch, DESCH, for house.com. You can go there, scroll all the way to the bottom, and make a cash donation contribution. So that's the place to go find you. You're looking for volunteers, door knocking, all the usual stuff. And of course, people can always reach you on the telephone at your number, 867. Can you say it with me? 5309.
You need to have that playing in the background.
I was gonna. It's a guaranteed YouTube takedown.
Mm-hmm.
If I do something like that, what I can play in the background is this. Wait a minute. This. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Gerrymandering show will come up sometime soon with Jenny. This has been the York County Democratic Party's YouTube show and podcast. As the title covers up our faces, we call it YCDP TV. Bye, everybody. Over and out.